this continuing tutorial series on Livestream Studio, I'm going to talk about transitions. This is a feature within the software I want to make sure you are aware of. I do want to say up front though, this is something I think you want to be careful with because it's really easy with transitions, if you're not careful, to go from a very polished kind of effect to something that just kind of comes off as corny and cheesy and low budget. And so I think you'll get what I'm saying whenever I show it to you. But here's what a transition is. Now remember, I've got my preview and I've got my program or my output. So right now I've got, in the green, which is preview, I've got that welcome loop video that I've showed you how to use in other tutorials. And then lucky you, right now what would be streaming is me on webcam. And we've talked about in other videos how we can transition from one to the other. One of the ways that we can do that is manually by moving this slider, and so I can do that manually. And one of the things you can do with that slider, why you may want to have manual control of that, is I could do something like this and leave it there. That's kind of an interesting effect. So that's one way to do that. And so that the transition that's happening there is that slow fade from one to the other. Of course, the other way to do that, the more automated way to do that, is to click here on the auto button. What that's going to do is it's going to trigger the transition for whatever the default period of time is. In this case, all of my transitions are set to 45 frames. 45 frames. Now, some quick math. In general, there are 30 frames per second. And so what we're saying here is that our transition is going to take just over a second, about a second and a half, to actually go, okay? So 45 frames. That's kind of the first thing. So let me just do it. Boom, there it went. And then I can auto and go back. You want transitions in general to happen fairly quickly. I would say the longest duration you would ever want them to happen is about 45 frames. You might even want it to be shorter than that. And I'll show you how you can change that. But again, you don't usually want kind of a long transition because the point is to kind of go from one to the next. Sometimes you may not even want to transition at all, and that's what this cut button is for. If I use that, it's just going to cut immediately between whatever I've got in preview and program without doing any transition at all. And sometimes, depending again on what you're doing, that may be what you want to do. But there is a tab here for your transitions, and the default for all of these right now is on this fade, which is what you're seeing here. It kind of fades from one to the other. But there are other options here. You can see there's a whole library of these. And just to kind of illustrate, let me pick one of the kind of very visually extreme transitions just to show you what this does. I'm going to pick this one, right? So let me do auto, and if you'll watch the program output, you'll see what I mean. Okay, so you have a whole library of these transitions. All of them, I believe, are set to that default of 45 frames. Right here is the fade one, which is the default. And if I wanted to change that, I could change that maybe to 30 frames, which would be exactly 1 second. Notice when I did that, when I changed it here, it's showing me that default duration here. So if you make an adjustment, it's going to show up over here. Now, in addition to all these various types, we can do something like that. There are lots of options. One of them is to do what's called a dip. And what that's going to do, it's going to kind of dip into a color that you set and then go to whatever the other video source is. You can change the color. Again, I'm selected this one. Right now I've got it on purple, but you could change the dip color depending on the liturgical season. So, if you pick green, I guess that's the ordinary way of doing a dip. Little joke there. But you just simply, pick your color. I've got it on this purple, and here's what that would look like. Kind of a subtle dip into purple before it switches over. So one of the things I want to point out is that you have, or you can set a transition for your main elements. That's going to be any of your media, or if you've got other camera sources, or you've got a guest who's on webcam or whatever, they're going to use whatever transition you've got under main, but you can also set a default for how you want any of your graphics to come on the screen. Remember, let me come over here and set my graphic element. Oops. Let me get things right there. So here I've got my lower third, and if I push that over, it does a little bit of a transition whenever it comes on the screen. That is being set here. So again, all of those lower thirds that I'm giving you are under Graphics 1. You can change that as well. So you can have, a different transition for your main video sources and then for your graphics. It's up to you. Again, the big thing here is I'm going to say don't get too carried away with this. One of the other things that you can do under transitions is create something that's called a stinger, which is a more specialized transition, and those are found here under this icon. Now, I have put one in. You can create these, and there are also various places on the internet you can download them, but I've created a stinger that actually matches visually with the lower thirds and things that I've given you. Let me show you what that looks like. I've got it all set up for you right here already. So again, we're just going to go from our welcome loop to webcam with this stinger as our transition. Here's what that would look like. Okay, so again, it's a different visual way of doing the transition. Stingers, I think, kind of have their place, but again, I think if you do them too much, it can kind of become overkill. But I just wanted you to be aware of this feature. What I would recommend is that you kind of, standardize on a set of transitions that you're going to use. And then, every once in a while you might want to throw in, this stinger or something like that. But again, I think this is a case where probably less is more. I hope these videos are helping you. And again, if you do something cool, I'd love to see it.